Hello and welcome to the football show here on Ourgame. Joined as ever by Declan, Bogue. I'm Shane Stapleton. We have Paddy Christie, former Dublin footballer, Tipperary coach, joining us shortly. Lots to look forward to this weekend. Obviously, Paddy has coached against Mayo in the All-Ireland semi-final last year, against Kerry in the Munster semi-final with Tipperary. A dub, of course, so he's got a foot in every camp we want to talk about, and he's just coming on stream here now. Paddy, how are you doing? Just joining myself and Declan here. Are you well? Good to see the tip colours on.
How's it going, lads?
Not too bad. You're heading down the country today, Tipperary against Cork in the under-20s as well. So best of luck in that. Bring her home. That's all I'd be saying. Anyway, Paddy.
Thanks very much. We have a massive challenge ahead of us. The Cork are after getting their act together underage now, so it'll be hard going now.
Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck in that for sure. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. If you want to get this cool Mayo jersey, a tip jersey, any sort of a jersey, go to their website and get 15% off with the promo code Ourgame. There's obviously loads of games on this weekend, which we'll come to. But Paddy, just as a dub, if you can put your sky blue hat on, Dublin 216, Meath 113. When you consider over the years that Dublin have been winning a lot of these Leinster Championship games by 15 points plus, I think that was the average there over going back a number of years. To you, does that say Dublin are coming back into the pack a little bit? What can we read into this game?
I suppose, Shane, I've been saying it for a good while now, and I've been proven to be wrong so many times in the last 3 years. I've been saying for at least 3, if not 4 years, that I think that the Dublin I suppose bandwagon will slow down on the basis of underage teams that I've seen, on the basis of other teams catching up, and each year I've been, as I said, proven totally wrong. I suppose this year it looks like it's beginning to happen. I would have seen at 2015, 2016. I looked after the Dublin minor teams. 2015 with a good team, and a number of those fellas are playing now in the senior team. Brian Howard, Evan Comerford, Paddy Small. We had Sean McMahon. We had a number of really good guys, and they looked like they had the ability. 2016 we had quite a weak squad, and I remember thinking, would many of them fellas play? I think Sean Bugler has come through from there, but not too much else. And after that, then you have a couple of weak enough teams as well. Now, I know at 20s level, Dublin have still been successful, but overall, I just don't think the conveyor belt is there, and that's natural. That's not anyone's fault. That just is life, and I think it's beginning to hit home now. You look at Dessie Farrell, the options that he's had in the last year. Not the same, particularly this year. Not the same coming off the bench. Paul Mannion a few years ago is an all-star, and he's coming off the bench. And now you're talking about a sort of a drop down, I think, in what you're getting there. So overall, yes, I still think Dublin are thereabouts, but it's beginning to very slowly sort of peter out, I think.
Declan?
Paddy, though, is that just simply because there's just been so much, they've been feasting on all the success, and the like of Eric Lyons is right. I'm at this here a long time. I've got an awful lot of Celtic crosses in my arse pocket, but yet I'm still not the man. I'm still not the fella that they pick to start games and finish games. And you know what? Like I just don't need it.
Yeah, that's a good question. You'd wonder. On a very honest...
Sorry, I'm not to interrupt you, not to interrupt you, but like, maybe Jack, maybe Paul Mannion, maybe a lot of the boys are feeling it, even the boys who are playing, is like, just how much can you win,
Yeah. On a very personal level, on the first part, like, if you're a sub and you're not getting a run at all, can you justify giving over your life to something like that? Yes, you're victorious. Do you feel the same? I'd question whether some fellas would be able to feel the same. There are fellas who have been able to commit totally. I think Darren Daly is one of them. You probably heard the lads mention him over the years. A fellow who got very little football and gave an awful lot to the squad and just loved being there and wants to be part of things. But I think there are other fellas who would say, no, I actually need to be playing regularly, and Eric Lowndes be one of them. He'd be playing for a lot of other county teams, can't get a run. So that's probably affected things all right. But I would be more fearful of, lads, the fact that you just don't get the same conveyor belt coming through. Like, I do remember looking at Conor Callahan 2014 with the Dublin Miners. I did the team under 17 that year. And I remember looking at him saying, he is a serious player. And when he hits the Dublin senior team, they're going to get some boost. And Dublin were already going well at that stage and winning All-Irelands. And Jim Gavin took maybe 2 years to give him a proper shot. He was around for a long time before he really got a proper run. And you had that sort of calibre of player coming through, and the Brian Howards of this world, Evan coming for Paddy Small. I just don't feel the same quality of players coming through, and I think that has two effects. Obviously, it has an effect on the bench, but it also means that the players who are there are not feeling the same pressure anymore, competition from the bench. So the starting 15 can just drop a little bit deep down because they don't feel like, I mean, if you were looking over your shoulder as a forward on the Dublin team over the years and you saw Conor Callahan on the bench, Paul Mannion, you sort of say, geez, I better get myself into gear here fast. But I'm not sure that's there anymore, and I think that's a massive psychological effect.
Yeah, like if you were to put it lazily, Declan, you could take up this point, I suppose. But like, there's 15 of Jim Gavin's last panel in 2019 no longer available. Obviously, there's the Stephen Cluxton thing. We don't know when Kevin Mcmanus is going to be back from the Olympics. You know, you mentioned Eric Lowndes, John Small, Owen Merchant, Robbie McDade. They're all injuries, and then McCaffrey, Mannion, and obviously Lowndes. Yeah, they're all out of it. But like, how is it manifesting itself on the field? My take was there's a couple of players that have crazy amount of miles on the clock playing, and a few more that aren't quite up to the level just yet. So Meath hit 1-3 from 8 turnover balls in the second half. That to me is how it manifested itself out in the field. Declan, what do you think?
Well, perhaps sloppiness, or perhaps maybe players coming in just aren't quite as standard as others, or as you say about miles on the clock. There's two categories. There's two different types of Gaelic football team right now. They're the Antrums and Fermanagh and Carlos and all that really probably need another 2 months of Gaelic football every summer to get better and to get used to playing more teams. But then you have Dublins who are going right to the end every year, and then they're straight into club championship, and they want their wee piece of loyalty and they want everything out of the player. Like, the moment that All-Ireland's won, the club manager is thinking, right, I'll give him tonight and I'll maybe give him tomorrow, but I'm ringing him the following day and I'm saying to him, I want everything you have for the next few weeks because we're playing championship in 10 days' time. Paddy, I'm sure you would have got that whenever Dublin were knocked out of the championship and so on. But there's a little part of me, and I just wonder how many players admit to this. Do you remember there was a documentary on Crossmaglen Rangers about 3-4 years ago? Thomas Niblock from the BBC did it, right? And I recall Jimmy Clark was one of the main contributors to it. He was down in the field and he was showing Thomas like his little black book that he keeps about scores that he got, goals that he worked, drills that he picked up, all these wee things that he noted, right? He had serious hunger as a player to be better by himself. But he was questioning the whole thing and said, the motivation across is to keep winning and keep winning and keep winning. But like, is it just to beat the other crowd? And he was kind of questioning his motivation, saying, is that it? Kind of thing. Even though he wanted to be personally as good as he could at this thing, he was just wondering about the motivational tools that were used. So, is it just to beat the other crowd? And that's it. And that's your whole purpose of life. And then, as it happened, Jamie dropped off the Crossmaglen panel within a couple of weeks of that happening. And I'm just wondering maybe that feeling is common with a very successful team, but it's never voiced that much.
Yeah, that's a very philosophical look at things.
Yet.
I'm very impressed, Declan. You are touching on something there, because when you are playing, like to go back to what you were talking about there, like for the fellas who are not winning at all, what is in it for them as well? Like, there are fellas, with due respect to some of the weaker counties, who every year are very unlikely to win the All-Ireland, if ever. And why are they there? Like, are they there to win or beat somebody else because it may not happen at all. They may lose in the first round of the championship and then lose in the first round of the qualifiers. So there has to be something more than that. There has to be other things. I think Dublin have been good like that, actually, because I think Jim Gavin made it out to be more than just winning a game. I think he spoke about this process all the time, about skill execution and enjoying doing things well, enjoying the camaraderie, building a strong bond, all these sort of things that don't necessarily are directly to do with winning. And I think if you have that, it's important. I agree with you. If your whole thing is to go out every year just to beat that crowd down the road who were laughing at us last year or they ripped us off 3 years ago, that's not really. I don't think that's strong. After a while, that wears out. It runs its course, and you need to really love the game, regardless of whether you're winning or losing. You do need to love the game. I suppose that's what's happening in some of those so-called weaker counties. People really love the game because they're going training in January or December, when in a normal year they are anyway, and they are getting ready for a pre-season, going through a lot of slog, knowing that deep down it's likely not going to come off for them. To come back with the Dublin thing, like, they know every year that they're going to be thereabouts. But it is a valid point. Like, how much do they get enjoyment out of it after a while? And there must be something else keeping them in the game. I do think Jim Gavin was good like that. I don't know what Desi is like, but it looks like with Jim Gavin over the years that he spoke about things other than winning, which is really important.
Yeah. Oh, one point I'd make, just even, it was nowhere near as long as the success Dublin have had, but even McCoolagh, with the few years where you're more or less going year after year after year, there is the sort of, like, it did seem like, after a while the season does go on endlessly, so it's a little bit tiring. But when you're winning, and especially if you're in the team, it's easy to stay motivated there. But I think for the players that are kind of scratching for game time, like, I could completely understand why Eric Lowndes would say, do you know what, I've 7 or 8 All-Irelands, I nearly have my fill of it at this stage. And I wonder, will Matty Kenny be keeping an eye out, because he was a pretty good Dublin hurling minor after that. Just even Paddy, on the Stephen Cluxton thing, what's your read on that? I mean, like, you're involved with Tipperary, so at times it's difficult to get Tipperary, every good Tipperary footballer out there. You obviously lost John Maher last year coming into the Munster Championship. So what's your read on the Cluxton situation?
The last bit you broke up with me there, Shane, the situation with Stephen Cluxton.
Yeah, what's your read on that? And, like, there's still no clarification on that. Do you think it has any impact on Dublin, just the fact that it's still up in the air?
Yeah, if I'm being honest about it, yeah, is the answer. I don't know if it's. I can't say it's one of the main reasons why things have gone down a bit, but I do think that it has an effect. And I think it's dragging on a little bit now. I'd say it could have an effect on Evan coming for the long term if it's not sort of sorted, because ultimately Evan's in a difficult situation there. He's one of the own club men, and I had him with the Dublin Miners. Really good guy. But you'd sort of worry about what could happen if Dublin do start losing games and things start going downhill, or even just getting challenged, like what happened with me last Sunday. And he has a couple of small mistakes. People are going to automatically start putting the boot in and start saying, "Oh, if Cluxton was there," and all this sort of thing. So I think for the start, even from the replacement, which is Evan Comerford, from his point of view, the situation isn't helping. It does look a bit strange that Desi.
Well, we just lost Paddy there. Hopefully we'll get him back up back shortly. Did you? I'm not sure how much you got to watch of that Dublin Meath game, but I was certainly watching it. And yeah, just as far as I do wonder, like, with all these different things going around, like Desi Farrell's coming in, taking over a team. Sometimes maybe when you come back for the first year under a new manager, it's kind of on autopilot. But it does feel a little bit like things are drifting. Paddy's just back on there.
Yeah, sorry lads, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's strange that Desi hasn't done something about it at this stage, because nobody seems to know what's going on, and there's all different types of stories going around, and it's a distraction that I mean, ultimately, if the guy is finished, he's been a fantastic servant to Dublin football. I don't know why it just can't be dealt with and announced, and that puts Evan on a firmer footing, I think. I know if I was Evan's a member of Evan's family, or was connected with him strongly, I'd sort of say which I am, I suppose. I'm living down the road from him, and I had him for years. I just worry that this will have a negative effect on him. And then when you think of the team, it's a distraction they could do without. There's a lot of small things beginning to nip away at Dublin at the moment. You've got the lack of underage success that I've mentioned. You've got fellas drifting away themselves that we've mentioned. You've got a COVID year. I suppose the whole Ferrari over the train and think that they were caught for as well out in Bogue. And there's a lot of small little things. None of them are going to are going to sink a ship, but they're putting small holes in the boat, and it's leaked water, and enough of those small holes will start to sink. So I think there are certain things you can't do much about, but with the closing thing, I think they should put that to bed. If he is finished, I don't know why they are sort of hanging around, and if it's in the hope that he might come back, I suppose that's hard for everyone to see that, I suppose, as well.
Paddy, you might, if you have a pair of headphones there, would you throw them on? There's just an awful lot of feedback there. If I could I'll just drop you off the call for a second, and if you could put on headphones, because there's just an awful lot of feedback there. Just to take up that point there, Declan, your own thoughts. It should be put to bed at this stage.
But I wonder, are they enjoying this? Not the general public, not knowing what the plans are, but like clearly. There's an impasse, and and if it wasn't personal, then it would have been put to bed. But it's clearly hurting Desi, and there's a huge amount of this is nobody wants to shoot Bambi. Like I mean, they had such great playing careers and that, and nobody wants to maybe say that they're not a particularly good manager. I mean. Can you imagine if Desi says, "Do you know what? Stephen Cluxton isn't throwing his lot in. I'm saying now that it's not good enough, and he is gone. He is gone." Like, that's some black mark on you as a manager. Even if you win every All-Ireland you enter after, people will still say, yeah, he was a brilliant manager and he won X, Y, Z. But he shafted your man at the end. He shafted Stephen Cluxton, our best player probably in history. How could he have done that? That was so cold. So he really is. I think. Anyone who's ever been involved in management will know that so much of it is about relationships, and he doesn't want to take a risk here. He would basically like Stephen Cluxton to say something himself publicly or do it. He won't do it. Desi won't make the decision. So it doesn't surprise me that there's an impasse or that it's not being addressed. Like, it's just no win whatsoever, whatever way Desi goes with it.
Would you not think that Stephen Cluxton would want to stay on for one more year to beat the likes of Pat Spillane and get 9 All-Ireland medals?
If you thought that Stephen Cluxton was motivated by Pat Spillane's record, then you'd be, I mean, I just wouldn't imagine it has anything to do with him. I think all his motivation comes from within. And that's as much as we can say, because nobody knows Stephen Cluxton and no one knows what his motivation are. To me, he just looks like a man who's completely self-motivated, self-driven. Even just in the snippets that you see a Dublin player's boots or anything mention of him, that he would get cranky and get angry when he felt that standards were slipping, and maybe there's a wee bit of that. But to think that he would be motivated by there's a record out there. Pat Spillane's got 9 All-Irelands. You want to chase that down? I just think he wouldn't even have an idea.
Paddy, I'm not sure if you maybe have your finger over the mic or something, or there's something that's causing a little bit of feedback there. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what it is, but we'll go again. So you recently you were involved in the Tipperary team that were beaten by Kerry, but certainly no disgrace. I mean, the scoreline wasn't that all that bad at all. I thought it was very harsh red card and Michael Quinlan. There was 2 lads at it and one lad went down as if he'd been shot. But that aside, what are your thoughts on Kerry and where they're at in the pecking order now?
Is that any better, Shane? No,
It's still skipping a little bit, but we'll give it a go for a minute. And look, if it won't come right, we'll
try it anyway. Can you hear me? You can.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
on my side of things, I suppose from the Kerry performance, we were happy. We felt that we performed well. We did what we set out to do, which was to try and minimise the damage that Kerry would do, and I felt we did that to a certain extent, which we were which we weren't happy with losing, obviously, but we felt that we did a reasonable job in trying to keep them down. I suppose if I'm being honest about it, when you look back on it, we were beaten by 10, 11 points. We were short Michael Quinlivan for most of the second half, and with a black card as well. From our point of view, we thought Kerry were decent, which we all knew they were going to be decent. But personally speaking, I thought I was very fearful that we would be absolutely overrun, being short a man, and particularly being short the likes of Michael Quinlivan. And if somebody told me beforehand that we would play fairly well with 14 men in the second half and a black card as well, and keep the score to that, I suppose, yeah, I like maybe Kerry felt a little bit under motivated playing Tipperary, but I would have been more fearful beforehand. And afterwards, I did say to people, yeah, they were good, but they are. I still think they're beatable. And I felt in the first 10 minutes that we were challenging them up front, even though we were playing quite defensively. We felt that we could score, and we did get a penalty in the first, I think, 10 or 12 minutes as well. So I think Kerry are good, but I don't see them being the automatic replacement for Dublin just yet.
Do you think, Shane, in general with Kerry, but people are I was just talking to someone who is involved in coaching a club down there, and he was talking to me about one of the players that's sort of arrived on the scene in recent times, right? And I'm just a name, there's no point naming names, but 3 years ago, he was brought in and he would have been seen as an up-and-coming star of Kerry football in the backs, and they said 3 years ago, there's just absolutely not a chance I'm making this. Like, I am a mile off it. And what he was actually referring to was the S&C element of it. And in general, like, he's caught up and now he's getting his place in that team. But in general, when you're talking to Kerry people, they don't rate their defence. They don't they're very sniffy about it. And whether that be because they don't have a Seamus Moynihan there anymore, or Tomas, Mark O'Shea, and they were spoiled with like really good man markers. Like, is there a sniffiness within Kerry there that they maybe feel they don't have the defence to win an All-Ireland?
I think that one's for you, Paddy.
Do I think that seems to be being told around a lot around the place, that Kerry's defence all the time. I mean, I thought we got scores relatively easy, considering we were playing short men up front in the first half. I thought we could score, but would I say that's their Achilles heel? I'm not so sure. I just felt overall that we were able to compete with them, and more than maybe people would have expected. And while eventually they obviously overran us, and their pace and their power and the people they're bringing off the bench are very strong. But like, yeah, they got a super goal in the first half, and that really gave them the push on. Up until then, you sort of felt, yeah, we could have a crack at this, and that goal was, would you score that again too easy? I don't know. It was a super goal, and Evan Comerford in goals had no chance. But it's hard to pinpoint a particular area of their week. I just don't know if, for me, I'm wondering whether that Cork defeat last year has affected them, and whether it's affected the overall management and the squad of players. I don't know if that's hanging over them a little bit. There's a lot of pressure in Kerry, and people expect an awful lot, and they're very high standards. And I think last year really knocked the stuffing out of them. And I'm wondering whether they obviously need to win an All-Ireland to get over that sort of thing, because it's probably until they win that All-Ireland, they're going to struggle, I think, because that Cork game really hurt them. They were the better team on the night, and Cork got a goal in the last few seconds, and I think that is hanging over them a little bit. It's a possibility anyway. That's just my own feelings on it. I felt that even just in the game itself and before the game, there just wasn't the same energy in the Kerry team that I expected to be there, and the same confidence. They seemed to be just a little bit unnerved or something like that.
And Paddy, like you've obviously were part of the tip setup that faced Mayo last year, and Mayo obviously got a big scoreline that day, winning that game. And then the last day out against Kerry, of the two, Mayo and Kerry, who do you think's a fiercer proposition? And obviously, we've to take into consideration that Cillian O'Connor is out.
I suppose, Shane, I would say, being honest about that, we would have felt, or no, I would have felt, if I compare the two games, that we were completely overran by Mayo at stages last year, and we felt that we couldn't get near them. Athletically, I was gobsmacked at how powerful they were, and obviously in the final, Dublin still took them, but which puts Dublin, I suppose, ahead of them again. But like for me, athletically, Mayo were ahead of Kerry. When I saw Kerry this year, the power and the pace, and up front, what Mayo did with us was they did allow us to get short kickouts and allow us to have the ball in the defence, but they nailed us very, very quickly. I mean, we were nearly dreading having the ball in our own defence because they were trying to take it off you so quickly, and that's what impressed me the most. I remember saying to Charlie McGeever after the game, who's one of the tip selectors, like athletically, Mayo are a serious outfit, and in Croke Park on a hard ground in an open pitch, they're a serious prospect. The big thing for me with Mayo over the years was I always felt they never scored enough. They never threatened enough up front. And I suppose you've mentioned Cillian O'Connor there, that they need to find new young forwards or develop the ones that are already there, because for me, that has always been a bit of an issue. Their defence has been great, midfield, very athletic, a lot of very, very positive things about the team. But for me, they need to be, they're not sharp enough up front over the years.
Funny, you say that, Paddy, and when you actually look at it down through the years, it was, I think a few years ago, Kieran McGeeney said that they were the biggest hitting team in Ireland. Like, it wasn't even Dublin. Is that what would you concur with that, Mayo, in terms of the bite they brought? Like,
well, that's what I was saying, Declan. Like last year, we were, all teams try and work on short kickouts, and it's a way of keeping possession. And when we look back on it, it was a mistake, because we've good men in the air in Tipperary. Stephen O'Brien would be strong in the air. We had Colin O'Riordan last year when he came back from Australia. We had Liam Casey, who's since finished up, but it's good men in the air, and we went short some of the time, and we got absolutely hammered. They came in and they just minced us, to the point where they were turning us over in our own full back line and then going in attacking the goal. So, I mean, I was very, very impressed with them. I last year I thought they were really good. I thought they were going to give Dublin a challenge in the final, which they did for a certain amount of time. And I just always felt that they just didn't have enough up front. They didn't score enough when they were on top. But overall, athletically, for me, Mayo have such an amount of athletes, powerful runners, and on a hard ground, on an open pitch, it just suits them down to the ground. So that's, for me, is what I was taken aback with. Did I feel the same with Kerry? No, I do think Kerry has some lovely footballers. They've obviously got the Clifford up front, some great players. But do you feel that same press, that same ferocity? I don't think so.
So, like, it's curious then, because if that's the case, then why do Mayo push aggressively so much up on the Dublin kick out, like so much? Why not actually try that, lay back way off them and let them have the short kick out every time, and then say, okay, they're like a Davy Byrne, Owen Murchan, and that they're fine ball carriers, but like there's only so many times they can take a big chop and a big hit before they kind of get sick trying to carry that ball past a wee bit of traffic.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one, because I've heard the opposite argument as well. I've heard people saying people should push up on Dublin's kickouts and try and make Cluxton think. I suppose that the big problem is with when you did push up on Cluxton kickouts was that he brought another angle into it a few years ago, where he started bombing it over the midfield into the half forward line, and then you had that problem as well. I'm not sure if Evan is ready for that yet, or whether they've worked much on that. But the kick-out thing is a big issue in that if you can turn people over in the full back line on their own kick-out, you're either creating a goal chance or at least a point chance. So it is very, very effective if you can do it. Obviously, by letting them retreating and letting them come at you, you're making the space smaller. But I don't know, good footballers let them have momentum like that. I'm not sure either. Like Owen Merchant taking off there at speed and getting up a full throttle, that's not ideal either. So it's very, very hard to know. When you have good footballers, you can do whatever you like, really, can't you, lads?
Yeah, absolutely. Paddy, I know you have to head down the country now for the Munster Under-20 final later today. So thanks very much for joining us, and best of luck in that final.
No problem, boys.
All the best. So that was Paddy Christie, their former Dublin footballer and Tipperary selector. So, yeah, just to jump on to that again, well, you know what, let's move on to some of the other games this weekend. And in light of the conversations we've been having there, Kerry against Cork, do you see... I mean, are you falling in line with basically what pretty much everyone else is saying, that this is going to be Kerry? But Ronan McCarthy did say that, do you know what, Kerry don't have a monopoly on hurt just because they lost last year. Cork lost the tip.
I love that line. And you can nearly take a guess where it's coming from. But, like, it is so true. Like, I mean, the whole idea that this, you know, the poor downtrodden people of Kerry with their 78 All-Irelands, like, you know, should suddenly be suffering, and we should all have their sympathy. Like Ronan McCarthy's absolutely right there. Like, you know, God knows what they're like or what they are, how they are in a game like this. Because when you look at it, like, obviously they came through decent tests, like, you know, and Clare speaks for itself what they've been doing for the last number of years. But this is now the step up, and this is what they've been like. They've been allowed to get through that. You know, probably like a lot of the teams that clearly, you know, Cork were caught breaching the COVID training ban, and therefore, you know, you other counties that were that totally obeyed it, right? So if you're caught, you're definitely going to obey it from then on. Like, you can't be caught twice. Monaghan, so, you know, and some of these counties were complaining at the start, once their league campaign got going, of being undercooked. Like, obviously in the first league game, Monaghan lost Armagh. Tyrone, I know for a fact, didn't do anything during lockdown, and they were off at, like, during the league, and Fergal Logan after the game there alluded to it and talked about how, you know, you got nothing for being choir boys, like, you know, over lockdown. And now obviously Cork pinged early, so they had to do what they did. You know, they've had a certain amount of time then, but they've been able to build gradually, layer upon layer, in order to get up to speed to take on Kerry. So, and the motivation of, like, having done it last year, albeit in kind of freak circumstances, and then lost to Tipperary, my God, I mean, that has to be an absolute sickener for Cork, far more than Kerry just losing to a sucker punch and a one-off game.
Yeah, like, Cork are looking for a first Munster title since 2012. It's mad when you think of that. Even when Kerry were winning the All-Irelands, Cork were still notching the odd Munster championship here and there, and the whole thing was, of course, that they couldn't beat Kerry then when they met them later on in Croke Park. But they were a match for them all along. Now Kerry can't win an All-Ireland, have only won one since 2009, and they can't get near a Munster title. And it's 26 years since they won down in Killarney. Mark Collins is the only Munster title winner on that team. Kieran Sheehan had to retire. Like, it feels like everything is stacked against Cork here. But then again, so that was the case last year too.
I know, absolutely. And, like, without becoming a media watch piece, Shane, unless you're living in those counties, like, and that goes for Galway and Mayo, and I know that there's discussions on Twitter about this, like, but it's so odd because there's just absolutely nothing about it. Like, you know, I mean, you look at all the Irish papers, north and south, and you just see nothing. I mean, this is a point that we were making off air before we came on, and I know obviously the Olympics are starting here, but I went through some of the big papers, right, main papers in Ireland, And I'm on one in particular now is at the website. And the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, still no mention. 7, there's a mention of a hurling story. It's not applicable. Then it's back into other stories. There's one on Joe Canning that's a sponsored content, and he's not even referring to the game against Waterford this weekend. Like, you know, there's a couple of podcasts. There's fair enough. There's a wee bit more in other ones, but my God, like, you know, I'm not saying that putting players up for interview and managers up for interview is the best way to do it, but at least there's something then. At least then you can hear a voice every day. This player says, even, you know, you can drill something out of it. But what I find is management have been sort of looking at this Zoom format and saying, yeah, look, you know, it doesn't really work for us, or journalists are being a little bit fed up of it. The group interview in a Microsoft Teams meeting, there's nothing more dispiriting about it. You know, it's kind of difficult. It's just not an ideal. It's just not an ideal format. But at least it was something, and that's even being offered by, and that lays at the feet of the provincial councils themselves. And the truth is that they could afford for a few bob for people to meet, whether it be socially distanced in a venue. I mean, my God, look at the weather we're having now. Like, you know, if we can do it after matches, put down a dictaphone in front of a manager and step 3 or 4 yards back and ask the questions from there. We could do that now for build-ups to games. It's just, it's a million, it's been said by me before, but it's a multi-million pound industry. This idea that it's amateur games and they're all volunteers and, you know, they'll only do what they want, like, come off it, like, you know, your sponsors, okay, well then get rid of all your advertising hoardings for a start, on the premium level and all the other different things, because you can attract, or you can ask players and management to actually give media interviews 2 weeks or a week before a provincial final. For me, I just can't understand it. Like, I know Ulster Council are busy beavering away trying to get everything sorted now for virtual interviews, but what is the other crowd's been at?
Yeah, absolutely. And get your comments in on it. A couple of comments came in earlier from Irish Tommy. Unfortunately, just having a little bit of trouble with Paddy's line, so I didn't quite get around to that, so apologies. But get your comments in on Facebook and YouTube. We can bring them up on screen and chat about them. I think most people are going to go with Kerry in this game. Like Cork, I think they will give a decent fist of it, but just with that amount of firepower, you just feel eventually to put up a decent score. I hope it's like the 2019 Munster final, where it was just goal after goal in the first 20 minutes, and maybe we can get an exciting one. But Cork, they do have good footballers there. There's no doubt about it. But just, have they got to the level that Kerry got to, even in the league, the second half against Dublin? Could you imagine Cork doing that?
No, just no. I mean, you know, Rory Deans and the Luke Conneys and Mark, look, they're all fine footballers, but there's just something a little bit otherworldly about Kerry's attack right now. I mean, when you see James O'Donoghue dropping off Kerry panel, like, you realise that he must have known that there's just no chance here of me getting a game with the amount of attacking talent. Like, so quite often when you see something like that, it would have become patently clear to him, a wee bit like maybe Bernard Brogan not even getting a call to play in the AVB games in Dublin training and going up to the second pitch and trying some shooting drills by himself. Like, I mean, you know, he knew the writing was on the wall. So I would imagine perhaps in-house games might have forced James Donaghy's hand there, and he just thought, I'm better off playing for Legion.
Yeah, and I think part of it too, when you talk about the coverage, is when people have been treated to the Euros there and the Olympics coming up, is seeing the same old provincial championship with the same old meeting of, oh, Cork are playing Kerry again, oh, how unusual. Galway are playing Mayo again, oh, how unusual. I mean, even to jump on to the Connacht final, Galway 46 Connacht titles, Mayo 47. You know, I mean, the history only goes back 130 odd years. It's a ridiculous amount of titles between it. But I have to say, I was reading a piece from Colin Sheridan in the Mayo News, and he was talking about, you know, being a young lad and going to these finals between the two teams. And he goes, my first Connacht final was Mayo versus Galway in 1987. Parked the car in Manulla and walked barefoot into McHale Park. It was okay to get separated from your dad, because if you did, you got your name called out over the PA system. It seemed a hell of a way to introduce yourself to inter-county football. Not only did you get your name called out, but your address and a vague description of your ruddy cheeks and portly disposition as well. it was like a charity auction. You then stood and waited to be collected like a prize calf. It's great, isn't it?
It's fantastic. And the curious thing is that my first instance of going to an intercounty game was, I was 3 years old. It was 1982, and it was an Ulster final. And same thing happened. My parents lost me on the hill, which was a big grass bank in Clonus back then. And apparently I was brought by the hand and given a lollipop, and my name was read out over the tannoy. And I think my father said, we'll wait till half time or something like that.
He's dead right. My memories of growing up, and like, it's just because the weather is so scorching at the moment, being in McDonagh Park in Nina, and there was a lad going around with a big cardboard box with a load of maxi twists or whatever sort of ice cream, roaring, ices, get your ices. I'm sure everyone has their own memories.
It can make something very different, but like, and we're getting into nostalgia, and do you remember the day chat? Like, but see, last Sunday, I just was reading Kevin McStay's column. He was talking about Brewster Park being a gorgeous little stadium, and the press box was a wee perch for him, and he's really loving Ulster football at the moment. But there was one thing about last Sunday that just really warmed the heart, and that was before the game, about an hour before the game. I forget his name, but he's Christie. He's from North Donegal, and he dresses up in a green and gold suit, and he plays the bagpipes. He goes round the crowd and he plays the Hills of Donegal, and then he stops there and he shouts "Up Donegal" and gets a big cheer. And I hadn't heard it in 2 years. And all of a sudden you're sitting there, sort of getting yourself sorted out in the press box. The next one, all you can hear is this wee reedy sound of the pipes across the pitch and the "Up Donegal." I'm like, oh, jeez, thank God, jeez, the world's coming back to normal.
Yeah, GA needs characters like that. I'm wondering about,
and I mean, it's like the Pecker Dunn, like, I mean, it's these kind of things are these. I'm after getting a fly on the forehead.
Did you go full Anthony Daly on us there? You did, didn't you?
Full Dalo. Dalo kept going because he was so passionate, like. But
do you know what though? Do you think Croke Park suits Mayo? Croke Park has to suit Mayo more than Galway for this, and we know that the Ulster final is going to be there. But actually, there was a replayed Connacht final between Connacht final 98 years ago, Sligo and Galway. So first time since 1923.
Brought to what, Jones's Road, as it was called back then?
Yeah, whether it was Croke Park or Jones's Road. I think Sligo had won the first day. Then they won the All-Ireland semi-final against Tipperary. Then there was, as was the case back then, a lot of objections on 6 different grounds. There was a rematch ordered. Galway ended up winning the replayed one back in 1923 in Croke Park, and then they went on and lost the final to Dublin.
That's interesting. I'll tell you what, there was another, like, I'm going to do a piece on it for the weekend, but it's just sort of looking back at the Ulster finals that was played in 04, 05, 06 in Croke Park. And I spoke to one of the men that made the decision. Actually, as it happened, it sort of went back to after the 03 final. That was the All-Ulster, All-Ireland final. Armagh Tyrone. And Liam Mulvihill at the time was the Director General. He wrote in his annual report that if it should happen that Armagh and Tyrone should meet in the Ulster final, they should possibly bring it to Croke Park. And then the late Donny Hughes Donny Murphy, the late Donny Murphy was the Ulster secretary at the time. Micheál Greenan from Cavan, he was the Ulster Council chairman. So between the pair of them, they cooked up this scheme that they would do that. They would bring it to Croke Park. They did it in June before they knew the finalists, and it ended up being Donegal and Armagh, and it was Donegal and Armagh for 06 as well, and then it was Tyrone Armagh for 05, and that went to a replay. And I think it was more or less full houses, if not about 70,000 in 05 at least. I think it was about 60,000 in the other years too. And what happened was they used that money. The Ulster Council used the extra money to employ a full-time secretary in each county and a full-time coaching officer. And at the time, this wasn't even 20 years ago. But then, like, that was completely revolutionary. And every county now more or less has it. But there was one county that weren't on board with it, that didn't want the games to be moved down to Croke Park. I'm going to give you a chance to guess who that was.
Oh, who's the most insular of the lot? Is that what
vested interests? Like who in Ulster didn't want the game at Croke Park?
At the time, were a lot of them being played at Casement Park and maybe Antrim?
No, none. The finals were moved out for 1971 to Clonus out of Casement Park. It was fairly regular that they were in Casement. Not every year, but most years, like, 4 out of every 5 years was in Casement Park. But then the modern troubles completely erupted in Belfast, so you couldn't run the risk.
So, Clonus, Monaghan then.
Exactly. And what happened with that money is then the counties were paying into a kitty into the Ulster Council, right? So they were giving them the money to employ these lads, but also pay us into a wee kitty. And then what they used that money for was to erect floodlights in the Lake of Brewster Park. New floodlights went up into Casement. Floodlights went up the athletic grounds, and Ballybuffet. All these counties then got their floodlights, right? But one county didn't get floodlights.
Go ahead.
And that was Clonus.
Yeah. You have to love the GA. There's nothing more GA than that little anecdote.
Well, I mean, this is it, but I'll tell you what, it was a ballsy move, and yet at the same time they're getting 60,000. So what it did for them, right, was you were able all of a sudden, like, if you had 38,000 in Clonus, that was more or less capacity, right? You have to pay full price for a child. But if you have it in Croke Park, what they were able to do then was put €5. That was the charge then for a child under 16 go at €5. So you, as a family man, could bring yourself, the wife, and then you could bring, say, 3 children for €15, and you could all sit together. And that was it. That's a marvelous thing too. Like,
do you know, I've only been to one Ulster final, and obviously that isn't going to happen for another week or so. I've only been to one Ulster football final, and that was Donegal against Monaghan. I say 2015. It was a boiling hot day, and what a location. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I have to say, I thought it was a brilliant venue. I know a lot of
the final whistle that day too.
Well, this is the one that Jim Mcmanus won because he was kind of bullish afterwards. So maybe was it 14? I might have the years mixed up, but it was brilliant.
14 he won it, and as he did, like he ran onto the pitch then and without shaking the opposition manager's hand or anything like that. 15, you see, I thought it was going to be 15 because that was kind of glorious, like in that Monaghan put on hit the diff, like the stadium announcer run hit the diff, if you're familiar with that word. And it couldn't have been any more apt for a county like Monaghan,
is Clonus, do you think Clonus when you think Ulster final?
Personally, like, there's an awful lot of there's some opposition to it. Like, you see people talking about Clonus, and remember Joe Bradley writing a column about it, like saying it's the Bangladesh, like, of Ulster, like that. Everyone's got their hand in your pocket, like, for €5 for parking in this field and so on. But I mean, I don't know. Is that the case when you go down to Castlebar, or you go down to wherever a Connacht final is held? Like, you go to Croke Park and you pay £10 into Clonliffe College or €10 to park your car in there. I'd say it's the same around Sample, around Thurles, is it? Like,
we wouldn't do that down in Tom Sample's field. I know there is the same sort of crack. Pay into the college.
Yeah, if a €5 charge for parking your car in the field, all that
into the greyhound track.
It's just there's just so much history, and it's a captive audience because you come into Clonus and people like to go up that Fermanagh Street, and then they usually have a banner across the street saying "Welcome to the Ulster Final." And 2018 Fermanagh and Monaghan stands out for me because it just seemed like there was absolutely everyone from Fermanagh there, and everyone seemed to have green flares, and the atmosphere. Another again scorching day, and it was just something exceptional. Like, it's almost emotional to see your own county, like, not even just for the football end of it or what was going to happen on the pitch, because you kind of had a premonition they were going to get a bit of a hosing, but to see everyone mobilised like that doesn't come along for a county like Fermanagh too often. But you can only imagine just the crack, like, and obviously, like, you've got your beer gardens and all the different subsets and groups and different people, like, and it's a vastly different place depending on the county that's competing on the day. When you get Armagh in there on a big day, the place is absolutely bananas. Like, it's just nuts. Like, and there's such a difference the North Armagh supporter and the South Armagh supporter. It is some culture clash. And even like, Antrim being there in 2009 against Tyrone, like, I mean, that was off the chain, that kind of stuff, like,
Yeah. Hey, so if we go back to Mayo against Galway, and it's going to be in Croke Park, like, Mayo haven't lost to any. Let's see, the All-Ireland final defeat to Donegal in 2012 was the last time that any team other than Dublin beat Mayo at Croke Park.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Wow, that's astonishing.
I can't, okay, fine, they had 6 players retire in January. 2 of them were starters. Cillian O'Connor is injured. Maybe Lee Keegan and his shoulder, there's talk of that. Is Kevin McLaughlin right? Will Dermot O'Connor be available? There are players who may not feature. But then again, Shane Walsh is a bit of an injury doubt for Galway, and it remains to be seen. Maybe Paddy Durkin or Oisin Mullen will go on him. I can't, Galway did beat Roscommon, yeah, and obviously Mayo coasted past Leitrim and Sligo there were jokes of matches, really. They were so one-sided. But I do feel that Mayo will win this. I can't massively see, Galway are decent, but they keep flattering to deceive, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and sure, look, I don't know if it comes down to this much, but you see James Horan, and his record against Galway. You see what the Tyrone lad said after Donegal is, we're coming up against them every year, so we know each other inside out. Before that game even happened, you just knew that, well, Paddy Hampshire would be marking Michael Murphy, Ronan McNamee would be on Paddy McBurty, Owen Ban Gallagher would be on Dar McCurry, and Conor Myler, and try and pick up Brian McKee. So, the exact same matchups are going to happen for Galway Mayo if they want them, obviously. But it's the record that Liam Horan or James Horan has over Galway. Their inability to upset that from time to time, only under Stephen Rochford and the 2 lads there before him. I just don't see it happening for Galway in any kind of, and just when they need to show up on big days, you're saying it yourself. Only Dublin have beaten them in Croke Park. Kerry obviously in that semi-final in Limerick, but as you said, the players that are gone were by and large all fringe players. This is a fresh enough outfit. This is a team that won't be caught here. They just won't be caught.
Yeah. So we kind of decided beforehand we'll talk about the top 5 footballers that are left in the football championship at the moment. Rank them 1 to 5. A tough one to pull out now, but of the teams that are left, Kerry, Dublin, Mayo, Tyrone, Monaghan, Cork, Galway, Kildare. Who are the top 5 footballers in the country? And I think we should start off with the ones that we know are definitely going to be in the conversation. So I think David Clifford is definitely going to be mentioned. Brian Fenton, maybe Kilkenny, Conor O'Callaghan. So nice dubs to Sean O'Shea. Paddy Durkin I put in there.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Conor Mcmanus. Now maybe not quite to the same level as a year or 2 ago. Daniel Flynn, outside shot. Kildare man.
You're just trying to accommodate Kildare here, aren't you?
I do think put him in a Dublin or a Kerry team.
You're also biased towards forwards or attacking defenders there too. You haven't named a Paddy Hampshire. You haven't named any of the Kerry backs. You didn't even talk about any of the dub backs there.
I didn't, to be fair. Who would you put in if you were putting in a dub back? Would you put in Davy Byrne, who's probably understatedly become a really important player there?
Well, he has.
Simons.
The Dublin defence, and that's a great success of them over the last decade almost, is their ability to work as a unit, and the ability of people like Brian Howard and Niall Scully to drop back, fill positions, and do all these kind of highly technical but difficult kind of things to do. Therefore, you're not going to get a pile of one-on-ones. You can talk about. You see the example of Mark O'Shea, an even better one is maybe the Keith Higgins on James O'Donoghue back in 2014. There's a little bit of that with Christie McKay against Paddy McBurty there in Ballybuffet a couple of weeks ago. But at the same time, it's the Dublin defence operate as a much more gelled unit like that. Even when they found that, you know, Johnny Cooper was getting isolated on David Clifford in 2019, they changed things up, and well, you know, their hand was forced anyway with a red card with Johnny. The following day, then they changed it up and made it completely different. I don't know if you can include one in there because they're probably not made to work hard enough in order for us to say that's a standout defender.
Michael Fitzsimons, just as a defender, somebody who, like, he tried to take a shot last weekend against me, got blocked down. He did a long wind up, and, you know, look, fine, he's a cooler clubmate of mine. But just in terms of a one-on-one defender, I'm not sure there's many better than him.
Yeah, he stands people up, and he's got a great. He's one of these boys is the biggest wingspan. Like, you know, he used to say, he's good at that, knobbing in, reaching around a man when he's in full flight, and tipping it out of his grasp, like, you know. So if you want to put him down, but are you going to pick him in the top 5 ahead of?
No, but you're the one who's making a push for defenders there, so I'm giving you a defender, somebody who's not even interested in the other end of the field in a lot of ways.
Well, you've got Clifford, you've got O'Shea. Yeah, you don't have any Tyrone players in there.
Well, I think Conor Mckenna, a bit like Daniel Flynn, could be arguably put him in the right team that's challenging for an All-Ireland. Like, you see what Conor Mckenna did, stealing in front of, I can't remember who it was, maybe McBearty. He stole in front of him to win a crucial ball near the end of the game, ran off the shoulder the whole way up the other end of the field. And
if you had it happened just in front of the press box, like, and
yeah,
it was just a chorus of like from different journalists just looking at, because the speed, and he was calling for the ball over his he was looking over his shoulder, screaming for the ball, and still making ground on the guy who was coming with the ball.
And didn't he give it to McCurry to knock over? Just looking at my notes here, I think he gave it to McCurry.
He did. He played it in, and a point came off it surely. But I mean, you know, he still has to deliver in championship across a full game. Like, I mean, he was unimpressive against Donegal last year, and he was back in as a sub here. First ball he kicked over the sideline, he kicked away, and I do believe that's probably just a little bit of over eagerness and just find his feet. But then what he did, he settled himself in a couple of simple touches, and you can see that, you know, if he can find the proper position, that might be centre back for a man like that. Because, like, I mean, you know, they put in Frank Burns there late. They put Michael O'Neill centre half forward. Michael O'Neill isn't really a centre half forward. Like, it was just an auxiliary defender for them. So if you can find a central position that works for him, maybe facing the ball as he did in Aussie rules, maybe a centre back, and let him settle there, he could be, you know, he's certainly got the explosive and the athletic. But we have to see how the fine motor skills all show up. Like,
but you're right, though. He was like a calf being let out of the shed after winter when he first came in. He was mad to just do something, anything. But, like, in terms of an athlete, I think, and it's no surprise they both spent time in AFL, but Daniel Flynn of Kildare, Conor Mckenna, who else is in that level of athleticism? Jack McCaffrey, I think, would be on the short list here, but he's not playing, obviously.
Oisin Mullen?
Oisin Mullen, yeah. And like Lee Keegan was at this level. I don't know if he quite is anymore. What would you think on that?
Well, I mean, injuries.
Same with James McCaffrey, actually, or James McCarthy.
James McCarthy's an animal. Yeah, he's just supremely athletic.
Brian Fenton, Khan.
Yeah, you look at some of the Tyrone boys there too. Like someone like I'm quite sure. I think Peter Hart is a very impressive athlete.
He is, yeah. But like too often in the big games, am I being harsh here saying John Small is closing down?
Pure athleticism, like, you know, he never ever stops. Like, you know, Matthew Donnelly is someone who's regaining that athleticism.
Turned the game in a lot of ways the last day. He had a hand on a lot of these scores against Donegal, didn't he?
Well, because they introduced the subs, and where they introduced them, like Cal McShane, then obviously Matty's going to drop deeper. And to me, he had his best game in a Tyrone jersey in years, because under Mickey Hardy was very much the midfield general, directing things, you know, short passing and pointing and directing and trying to get. Whereas he just said, "Damn it, I'm going to have to break a few lines here." Once he starts doing that and growing in confidence, it's almost like he hasn't been backing himself for the last number of years.
Where do you think McGeary can go, by the way, Kieran McGeary?
But McGarry's always been like, people in Tyrone get a bit frustrated with his tackling, and he's normally pick up a card, like, you know, you're sort of guaranteed a card with him. But like, he is unbelievably fast, unbelievably athletic. Like, and you look at the last number of years, big games where Tyrone have actually done well in, right? Thinking about the backdoor game against Donegal and Ballybofey in the 18, McGarry came very strong and had a late point in that. The Ulster final in 2016 against Donegal, everyone remembers Peter Hart's point from the next town land, and the one Sean Kavanagh kicked and Jeff Bezos caught when he was in the moon and dropped over the park. The winning point, I think, that day came from McGarry from way out left off his left boot. You know, people forget that. Like, McGarry's point, a big play, and that was his first year in senior football then too. I really rate him. I don't really understand why people are underwhelmed by him. I think he's a fine player. Tendency to give the ball away the odd time, but I don't think he made too much wrong. And he got what, three points from play. You got a wing forward kicking 3 points from play. You're doing good. Like, and a wing forward who's an auxiliary defender, really.
Yeah, and he set the tone too, got the first one. If you have any comments, let us know who you think should be. If they're on YouTube or Facebook, we can bring them up on screen. So, right, if you were to pick who is Tyrone's best player, if we were to put into this conversation and try and put someone up there in the top 5, who's Tyrone's very best? Can't do without.
I think Tyrone have a load of different variety of players. Like, you know, if you were to look at this, you're either picking the playmaker, like the Sean O'Shea. Right, I know he's playing full forward. Like, you're picking the finisher, like a David Clifford, or else you're picking a very elegant looking midfielder like a Brian Fenton. Tyrone are chopping, changing in their midfield all the time. Colin Kilpatrick and Brian Kennedy were there. They're very, very inexperienced. Like, that was a first time for them to even play together, I think, ever. Because I can be stand to be corrected on that. But, like, you know, they're developing players. They're not elegant. Manny Donnelly is one of these middle-aged players who's busy, but and doing an awful lot and contributing well. But you're not going to say that he, right now at the moment, is one of the best 5. I kind of just think that you have to maybe categorise this debate and say who's the most breathtaking. And for me, that would be McCarthy being the talk and Fenton being the conversation. O'Shea, Clifford, and who after that? Conor Mcmanus, for the ability to lead a team. Like, I mean, he's actually, you know, people talk about Michael Murphy making his championship debut in 07 and his longevity. Like, Conor Mcmanus played in that Ulster final in 07.
Didn't he start off as a wing back?
Yeah, he was a wing back. I'm not sure now, like, whether he started that game or was brought on. Like, but I mean, you know, what a player he has been for that county. Like, you know, and never really, no long-term injuries. He's been lucky, I suppose. But, like, I mean, what a sensational impact! Like, what a striker of the ball! Like, you know, remember, cast your mind back to even 2018, and the point he hit against Tyrone in the rain in the first round in Healy Park to knock Tyrone out of the quarter final. Do you remember? Do you recall that? I mean, that was otherworldly. Yeah, and I mean, people talk about him being quiet, but, you know, on Saturday night he scored a goal and a point within the first 3 minutes. He had his hand in a lot of stuff, and then when they were 2 points down, he got fouled 3 times and stuck them over from varying degrees of difficulty. They were pretty tricky. And then, like, Stephen O'Hanlon got the insurance point for them. But you know, it was sort of like Henry Shefflin against Tippin in All-Ireland final, or Galway in the 2012 second half, where he just bent the game to his will. I'm not going to be beaten, so I'm going to do it all. So the whole point was get the ball to Conor Mcmanus, and he will draw fouls. And whether people want to say, "Oh, that wasn't a foul," or this wasn't, they were all blooming fouls. You look back, there was one stage where Mcmanus was actually fouled by 2 players, and one of them ended up with his arm around his neck and a headlock. Like, you know,
here's a question for you, right? Who and this is of players that could be in contention for the top 5.
Rian O'Neill.
He's brilliant, but they're gone. They're gone now. But he is absolutely class. There's a few of those Armagh footballers I really like watching. But just between two players, right, that are in this list, and maybe introduce someone else if you think they should be in this conversation. But I think David Clifford and Conor Mcmanus are two players that you'd happily sit there in the warm-up and just watch them kick the ball, because it's really graceful and classy to watch. Who of those two would you pick to watch kicking a ball around?
It's is this not sort of like what you're used to too? Like, because you've been watching Mcmanus for so long that you're just used to watching him, right? And maybe Conor's kick isn't just quite as graceful as Clifford's, right? But I remember having this discussion. Paddy accused me of being philosophical about Jamie Clark there earlier, and this is philosophical. But I had a long conversation once with a player, with an intercounty player, about different players. We were talking about different players. And he was saying that he even enjoys watching David Clifford bounce the ball. We were kind of drooling over the way that he can shift his whole body from going from right hand to left with a bounce, and just open the field up for himself, or even get the hands down really low as he did in Croke Park a few times, and just literally hop the ball off the floor a few inches when he's trying to find himself a bit of space, when he's twisting and turning. Like, the way he moves, his body mechanics and stuff like that, fair enough. This is extreme nerd territory, but I could watch it all day long.
So I probably I know what you're saying, though. There's a slight bit more grace than Clifford, but there's just something about when Mcmanus kicks the ball. It's a bit like a golfer's swing. The ball goes, and then it kind of gets an extra jet boost instead of going again. I'd always think back of being at the Aussie rules, the compromise rules back in 2014 out in Australia, and just watch him kick balls over. And he doesn't just kick them over; he kicks them like double the height of the post at times. He's a majestic
trust himself, isn't it?
Yeah. So back into this conversation, though, of top five, go back to 2018. Paddy Durcan kept Ryan McHugh, Shane Walsh and Jack McCaffrey all scoreless, and he scored 8 points himself. I think Paddy Durcan is among the best footballers of the country.
Aye, there's no disputing about that. He's a sensational player. Then what he offers you too, so much of this too is predicated on what does he give you going forward. Owen Ban Gallagher was extremely unlucky, I think, the same year to miss out on an All-Star because he had made such a scoring contribution. But very rarely, actually, if you look at that game at the weekend, Owen Ban Gallagher won about 4 frees where they would work the ball around, and eventually he would just charge straight through, trying to head for the D, and he'd be taken down by 2 or 3 thrown players, and he got his free, and then Donegal were just about hanging on in the game. And you're saying, God, Owen Ban Gallagher's having a fine game. At the same time, he was marking Darren McCurry. So his defensive contribution was sort of maybe overlooked when you look at the bigger picture. And, you're talking there, in fairness, you're backing it up, Paddy Durcan. Here's how he marked, but we also know what he gives you going forward. So he is explosive, and he's all those things. And, one man's meat's another man's poison. You might see another player I'm going to mention his name here. If we look at play, you said about we talked about the graceful midfielder and the finisher and the creator. There's another bracket now of intercounty players, and I think we should maybe talk about this, and that is just the link man, right? For a time, I suppose you could say that Matty Donnelly was the link man for Tyrone. I don't think that's his role. Shouldn't be his role. Niall Scully is a brilliant link man, right? Kevin McLaughlin. Fair enough to say that he's a link man, he knits stuff together.
You go with you, yeah. And Paddy Clifford is now doing it for Kerry, maybe.
Yeah, but I don't think there's a better player in Ireland at that role than Ryan Mcmanus. I think he is unbelievably energetic. He can pop up anywhere. If he's not in the picture, he will drag his man very, very wide. He will open up that channel. But within 30 seconds, he could be on the end of that move, steaming through the middle. It was him that set up one of the goals. Which one it was? I think it was for... No, it wasn't for Jack McKeown, but it was certainly Jack McKeown passed to Ryan Mcmanus. I think he gave the final pass to Conor Mckenna for his goal. He just gets on the ball all the time. He never, ever loses it. He's always covering his position. I just think there's nothing like him. I think he's he scored 3 points from play against Galway in the Super 8s, and 2018, and I'm not sure he's a consistent enough scorer. Like, I mean, obviously, when the heat was on them against Tyrone in the league, he hit the final point to draw that game for Monaghan. He does pop up with the occasional one, but I just think there's nothing like him for that role. He's just a class act.
Yeah, we better pick our top 5. We didn't even mention the likes of Shane Walsh, Damien Comer. There's probably a few other players in there too. But my top 5, and you can kind of interject if you like, Brian Fenton 1, Conor Callahan 2, Clifford 3, Durkin 4, and Kieran Kilkenny 5.
Yeah, well, you've got the 3 dubs. You've got Fenton, Kilkenny, and Con, and they kind of have to go in, and Clifford has to go in. I'm not going to dispute any of it. Only the placing, like, you know, I mean, is Brian Fenton on current form and more exciting? Do you have James McCarthy in there?
I don't. I just watching the Meath game the other day made me wonder, has he a lot of miles on the clock? Yeah, and just look, to be fair, look, if you wanted to argue the toss on that, but that'd be my 5.
After I've had a chance to formulate something.
Yeah, and then just very quickly, we'll just do this in 2 minutes. Power rankings of 1 to 8. What order do you put the counties in the moment, or at the moment? Dublin 1.
Dublin 1 anyway.
Dublin 1. Kerry or Mayo 2? Mayo would have to go through Dublin in All-Ireland semi-final.
Yeah. No, I think Kerry or 2, Mayo or
3.
Down to what do you think that Tyrone and Mayo after that, because they are the next best? There's no disputing that.
I would think, do Tyrone have a better chance of beating Kerry in an All-Ireland semi-final than Mayo do of Dublin? I think Mayo have a better chance of getting through to a semi-final or to a final, because Dublin look weaker.
Possibly. Like, and if Tyrone come out of those championship final, the win, and maybe facing Kerry, like, geez, there'll be an unbelievable. They'll talk about using it for motivation, but there would be some doubt about those 6 goals shipped in Killarney too. Like, so maybe Mayo might just say, you know what, Dublin with their injury problems and their retirements and so on, this might be the time.
Would you put Monaghan ahead of? Are you assuming that Tyrone will beat Monaghan?
I just can't call it, but I just think, having looked at them, that Tyrone have a little bit more on the bench than Monaghan.
Yeah, and then I think we all expect Dublin to beat Kildare, so that puts Kildare last because I think they're the biggest outsiders. Cork could beat Kerry, but I'd give Galway a better chance of beating Mayo than I would of Cork beating Kerry.
Yeah, that's fair enough, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that makes us Dublin, Kerry, Mayo, Tyrone. That's the top 4. Monaghan, Galway, Cork, Kildare, based on how big an outsiders they are in each of their provincial finals.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, look.
We've done okay there.
And we have, actually.
Like the other stars meeting every year. Yeah, we've done a good job, yeah.
Yeah, as Michael 1984 with the Terminator 2 emoji goes, if Tyrone come out of Ulster, the game against Kerry will be a serious challenge, but should be fireworks. I think that's definitely true. Declan, Bogue, thank you very much. We nearly have it all said, have we?
I think we've sorted the whole thing out here.
We have indeed. Thanks very much. A reminder, we're brought to you by Ourgame. If you want to get this Mayo jersey or any other jersey, go to their website and use the promo code Ourgame for 15% off. Chat to you later, Declan.
Thank you, Shane.